Every Sunday, Naomi writes to her late husband, until a wind-blown page lands at the feet of a stranger. As letters are exchanged, grief opens the door to a love neither saw coming. Before we get into the story, comment below, where in the world you are watching from today. The September morning was chilly as Naomi Sinclair pulled her blue sedan into the cemetery parking lot. She checked her watch, 8:15 a.m., just like every Sunday for the past 3 years. Her routine never changed. She grabbed her folding chair from the back seat, along with the small tote bag that held her thermos of coffee, a pen, and her notebook. The cemetery was quiet at this hour, just how she liked it. The grass was still wet with dew, soaking the edges of her jeans as she walked the familiar path to Jordan's grave. Her late husband's headstone stood under the shade of an old oak tree, simple grey granite with his name, and the dates that marked his too short life. "Morning, Jordan," Naomi said, setting up her chair. She was 30 now, but sometimes she still felt like the 27-year-old widow who had collapsed at this very spot during the funeral. She poured coffee into the thermos cup and placed it on the flat stone beside the grave. "Black with 1 sugar, just how you liked it," she said, pouring a second cup for herself. "I know you tell me I'm wasting good coffee, but some habits are hard to break." Naomi took a deep breath and opened her notebook. Every week she wrote a letter to Jordan. It had started as her therapist's suggestion, a way to process her grief, but it had become much more than that. It was her connection to him, her way of keeping him in her life. She clicked her pen and began to write. "Dear Jordan, I had that dream again last night. The one where you're still here and we're in our old apartment and everything is normal. Except this time, I knew it was a dream even while I was in it. I knew you weren't really there, but I still didn't want to wake up." Tears formed in Naomi's eyes, but she blinked them away. 3 years of grieving had taught her that sometimes it was okay to let the tears fall, and sometimes it was okay to hold them back. Work is the same. Carol is still driving everyone crazy with her micromanaging. "Remember how you used to imitate her at dinner? I still laugh thinking about it." A breeze rustled the leaves above her, and Naomi looked up at the sky. It was that perfect shade of autumn blue that Jordan had always loved. "I miss you. Not just the big things. I miss the way you hummed when you brushed your teeth. I miss finding your dirty socks under the couch. I miss your voice. I miss your laugh. Some days the missing is so big I don't know how to carry it." Halfway across the cemetery, Asher Duval walked with his head down, hands in the pockets of his expensive but understated coat. At 32, he looked older, his face serious, his eyes carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much loss. Every Sunday, without fail, he visited his sister Eliza's grave. She was the last of his family, taken by cancer 5 years ago. First his parents in a plane crash when he was 20, then his wife Sarah in a car accident when he was 25, and finally Eliza. Each loss had closed him off a little more, until he was just a shell of a man running a tech empire worth billions. Asher preferred to visit early, when the cemetery was nearly empty. He didn't like being recognized, not that many people would know his face. He had deliberately kept it that way, staying out of the press despite his wealth. Grief and money were a toxic combination for public consumption. He reached Eliza's grave, a white marble stone with a simple inscription, "Beloved sister, friend to all." Asher didn't speak aloud like Naomi did. His grief was silent, internal. He simply stood there, letting memories wash over him, until he heard a voice. It wasn't unusual to hear other mourners in the cemetery, but something about this voice made him turn his head. A woman sitting in a folding chair, reading aloud from a notebook. "I went by our favorite restaurant yesterday," Naomi was saying, unaware of her audience. "I sat at our table and ordered your usual. The waiter looked at me like I was crazy, ordering 2 meals. I didn't care. Sometimes I need to remember the details or I'm afraid they'll slip away." Asher knew he shouldn't listen. This was a private moment, but there was something about her words that resonated with him. How many times had he ordered Sarah's favorite dessert, even though he didn't like sweets? He turned away, focusing again on Eliza's grave. But the woman's voice carried on the morning air. I'm angry with you today, Jordan. I know that's not fair. You didn't choose to leave. You didn't want that truck to run the red light while you were on your motorcycle. But I'm still angry. Because you promised me forever, and 3 years wasn't forever. It wasn't even close. Asher closed his eyes. He understood that anger all too well. Naomi wiped away a tear and continued writing. But even when I'm angry, I still love you. I still miss you. I still wish you were here. The breeze picked up and suddenly a page from Naomi's notebook tore free. She gasped and reached for it, but the wind carried it away, tumbling it across the grass. Asher saw the paper dancing in the wind, heading in his direction. Without thinking, he stepped forward and caught it just as it was about to blow past him. He glanced down at the handwritten words before he could stop himself. Sometimes I worry that I'm forgetting the sound of your laugh. I play your old voicemails, just to hear your voice, but it's not the same. It's not you laughing at one of your own bad jokes, or the way you'd laugh in your sleep sometimes. How is that possible? I didn't know people could laugh in their sleep until you. There are so many little things about you that no one else will ever know. Just me. And sometimes that feels like too much responsibility to bear alone. Asher felt a stab of recognition so deep it almost took his breath away. He had written almost those exact words in his journal after Sarah died. He looked up to see the woman hurrying toward him, her brown hair coming loose from its ponytail, her face flushed. "I'm so sorry," Naomi said, reaching for the paper. "The wind just took it." Asher handed it back to her, careful not to make eye contact. "It's okay," but as Naomi took the paper, their fingers brushed, and she looked up at him. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Naomi saw a tall man with dark hair and serious eyes, handsome, in a stern sort of way. But what caught her attention was the familiar pain she recognized in his expression. "Thank you," she said finally, clutching the letter to her chest. Asher nodded, suddenly uncomfortable. "Oh, you're welcome." He turned to go, but Naomi spoke again. "Do you come here often?" she asked, then winced. "I mean, that sounded like a terrible pickup line. I just meant, I'm here every Sunday and I've never seen you before." Asher hesitated. He wasn't used to talking to strangers, wasn't used to talking much at all these days, but something made him answer. "I'm here every Sunday too. Different section." He gestured vaguely toward Eliza's grave. "Oh," Naomi said softly. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For your loss. Whoever it is you come to visit." Asher felt an unexpected lump in his throat. People didn't usually acknowledge his grief directly. They tiptoed around it as if loss was contagious. "My sister," he said simply. "You?" "My husband." Naomi's voice caught slightly on the word. 3 years ago." Asher nodded. There was nothing to say, no words that could make it better. They both knew that. "I'm Naomi," she said, offering her name like a small gift. Asher hesitated. If he told her his full name, she might recognize it. Might connect him to Duval Technologies, and all that came with it. He wasn't ready for that. "Ash," he said instead. "Not a lie, just not the whole truth." "Well, thank you again, Ash," Naomi said, holding up the letter. "I should get back." "Of course." As Naomi walked away, Asher watched her for a moment before returning to Eliza's grave. Something about the encounter had left him unsettled. It had been so long since he'd had a real conversation with someone who didn't work for him or want something from him. Naomi returned to Jordan's grave and sat down, tucking the loose page back into her notebook. She glanced over her shoulder, but the man, Ash, was no longer visible from where she sat. "Something strange just happened, Jordan," she said aloud. "I met someone. Not like that," she added quickly, as if Jordan could hear and might be jealous. "Just someone who seemed to understand, without saying anything. Is that crazy?" She sipped her coffee, now lukewarm, and stared at the headstone. "I talk to you every week, but sometimes I wonder if anyone else understands what this is like. Living after someone you love is gone, carrying on when part of you doesn't want to." For the next hour, Naomi finished her letter, drank her coffee, and sat in comfortable silence. When it was time to go, she packed up her chair and tote bag. "Same time next week," she promised, touching the top of the headstone gently before walking back to her car. What she didn't know was that Asher had left earlier, driven back to his penthouse apartment in his discreet black sedan. What she didn't know was that for the first time in years, he was thinking about something other than work or his grief. He was thinking about her words, about the raw honesty in them, about how she had captured exactly what he had never been able to express. Asher sat at his desk, overlooking the city skyline, and opened his laptop. His assistant had emailed him the agenda for tomorrow's board meeting: acquisitions, expansions, the usual business of running a tech empire. But at the bottom of the email was a note about a real estate development project. Duval Technologies had acquired a large parcel of land through a subsidiary. The plans were to develop it into a new research campus. Asher frowned and clicked on the attached map. His blood ran cold as he realized exactly what land they had purchased. It was the cemetery, his sister's final resting place, the grave of Naomi's husband. All of it, soon to be rezoned and developed. He closed the laptop with more force than necessary. He hadn't been directly involved in the acquisition. His company was too large for him to oversee every deal. But now that he knew, he couldn't. Ignore it. Asher walked to the window, looking out at the city below. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. Not just grief or emptiness, but something else. Something like purpose. He made a decision then, though he didn't fully understand it himself. He would go back to the cemetery next Sunday. He would see Naomi again. And maybe, just maybe, he would find the courage to tell her the truth about who he was and what was about to happen to the place where they both found solace. But first, he had to figure out how to stop his own company's plans without raising too many questions, because something told him that the quiet Sunday mornings in that cemetery were more important than any business deal. As the sun set over the city, Asher picked up a pen and a sheet of paper. It had been years since he'd written anything by hand, years since he'd tried to put his feelings into words. "Dear Eliza," he began, and then stopped. No, that wasn't right. He crumpled the paper and started again. "To the woman who writes letters, to her husband." It was the beginning of something. He didn't know what yet. But for the first time in a long time, Asher Duval was curious to find out. The following Sunday dawned grey and drizzly. Naomi sat in her car, watching raindrops race down the windshield. She had almost stayed home, almost. But 3 years of Sundays had taught her that routine was sometimes the only thing keeping her upright. She pulled on her raincoat, grabbed her umbrella, and gathered her things. The cemetery was nearly empty today, the rain keeping most visitors away. As Naomi approached Jordan's grave, she noticed something unusual. There on the bench near his headstone was a folded piece of paper weighed down by a small stone. She looked around, but no one was in sight. With curious fingers, she picked it up and unfolded it. "To the woman who writes letters to her husband," it began. "You wrote to someone you lost. I've never written to anyone I had, but I think I'd like to try with you." Naomi's breath caught. The handwriting was neat, but masculine. She knew instinctively it was from the man she'd met last week, Ash. She sat on the bench, reading the rest of the letter. "I heard you reading your letter last Sunday. I didn't mean to listen, but your words found me anyway. You said you were angry that 3 years wasn't forever. My wife has been gone for 7 years, and I'm still angry too. Does it ever go away? I don't know. Maybe that's why we keep coming back here, to remember, to forget, to figure out how to live in between." The letter wasn't signed. Naomi read it 3 times before folding it carefully and tucking it into her pocket. She set up her chair, poured her coffee, and opened her notebook. But instead of writing to Jordan, she found herself looking around, wondering if Ash was watching from somewhere. Across the cemetery, Asher stood beneath a large oak tree, partially hidden by its trunk. He hadn't planned to watch her find his letter. He'd left it earlier, intending to be gone before she arrived. But something had made him linger. He saw her read the letter, saw her tuck it away, saw her scanning the cemetery afterward. He stepped back, making sure he was out of sight. He wasn't ready to face her. Not yet. Last week's brief encounter had stirred something in him, something he'd thought was long dead. Connection, interest in another person. It terrified him. After losing everyone he loved, Asher had built walls around himself. his wealth. Made it easy to isolate, to interact with people only on his terms. His employees knew not to bother him with personal matters. His board of directors respected his privacy. He lived in a bubble of his own making, and it had been safe there. Lonely but safe, but now he'd reached out, left a letter for a stranger. A beautiful stranger, whose grief echoed his own. Asher watched as Naomi finally turned her attention to her notebook and began to write. He should leave, he knew. Go back to his sister's grave, stick to his routine. Instead, he waited, curious, to see what she would do next. Naomi finished her letter to Jordan, shorter than usual, her mind distracted by the mysterious note. As she was packing up to leave, she hesitated, then tore a fresh page from her notebook. If Ash could write to her, she could write back. To the man who's never written to someone he lost, she began. Thank you for your letter. It's strange. How grief can be so isolating and yet so universal at the same time. 7 years is a long time to carry that weight. 3 years feels like forever to me. But I guess forever keeps getting longer. She paused, pen hovering over the paper. What else should she say to this stranger? I don't know if the anger ever goes away completely. Some days it's barely there, just a whisper under my breath when I see a happy couple or a motorcycle on the road. Other days it roars back, fresh as the day it happened. But I think, as long as we keep showing up, keep remembering, we're doing okay. Maybe that's all we can ask for. She signed it simply, Naomi, and then left it under the bench, tucked beneath the same small stone he had used. The next Sunday, Asher arrived at the cemetery earlier than usual. He went to Eliza's grave first, spending a quiet moment there. Before walking to the bench near Jordan Sinclair's headstone, his heart quickened when he saw a folded paper waiting for him. He hadn't been sure she would write back, hadn't been sure he wanted her to, but now, holding her response in his hands, he felt something like anticipation. He read her letter twice, taking in every word. Then he pulled a pen and paper from his coat pocket and sat down to write his reply. By the time Naomi arrived that morning, Asher was long gone, but his letter was waiting for her. Naomi, it began, and seeing her name in his handwriting gave her a strange flutter in her chest. Thank you for writing back. I'm not good at this, talking about feelings. My sister used to tease me about it. She'd say I was like one of those Russian nesting dolls, with smaller and smaller versions of myself hidden inside. I think after she died, I locked up the smallest doll and threw away the key. Naomi smiled at the image, continuing to read. You asked if we're doing okay as long as we keep showing up. I've been thinking about that all week. I show up, but I'm not sure I'm really here, not the way you are. You bring coffee for your husband. You talk to him. Your grief is alive. Mine is just empty. Is that worse? I don't know. This letter too was unsigned, but at the bottom he'd added a postscript. P.S. My sister loved the rain. She used to say it was the world's way of washing everything clean so we could start over. I thought of that last Sunday watching the rain fall on her grave. I wondered what you were thinking as it fell on his. Naomi sat down on the bench, touched by his words. She glanced around, half hoping to see him, but the cemetery was quiet, with only an elderly couple visiting a grave in the distance. She set up her chair and went through her usual routine, writing to Jordan. But her mind kept drifting to Ash's letter, to the man behind the words who seemed to understand her in a way few others did. When she finished, she wrote a reply and left it under the bench. And so it began. Every Sunday they exchanged letters, never meeting face to face, but sharing pieces of themselves on paper. Asher wrote about his sister Eliza, about how she had been the bright one, the social one, while he preferred computers to people. He wrote about losing his parents, about how Eliza had helped him through it. He wrote about his wife Sarah, how they'd met in college, how she died just 3 years into their marriage. What he didn't write about was his wealth, his company, or the fact that his corporation now owned the land beneath their feet. Naomi wrote about Jordan, how they'd met when she spilled coffee on him at a cafe, how he proposed in the middle of a rainstorm because he couldn't wait another minute, how he'd always wanted children but they'd decided to wait until they were more financially stable, a decision she now regretted every day. Their letters grew longer, more personal. They shared jokes, memories, dreams they'd abandoned, small victories in their daily lives. 4 weeks into their correspondence, Asher left a different kind of note. "I'll be at the Blue Cup Cafe on Main Street this Saturday at 10 a.m. If you'd like to have coffee with a friend who understands, I'll be waiting. If not, I'll understand too." Naomi read the invitation a dozen times. Part of her was eager to meet him properly. Another part was terrified. Their letters had become important to her, a bright spot in her week. What if meeting in person ruined that? But curiosity won out. Saturday morning, Naomi changed her outfit 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple blue sweater. She arrived at the cafe 5 minutes early, her heart pounding as if she were going on a first date. Which this definitely was not, she reminded herself. This was just coffee with someone who understood grief. Nothing more. She spotted him immediately. Ash was sitting at a corner table, his back to the wall, watching the door. He looked different in this setting, more polished in his expensive coat and crisp white shirt. When their eyes met, he stood up, a tentative smile on his face. "Naomi," he said as she approached. "Ash," she replied, suddenly shy. "It's good to see you. Properly, I mean." He pulled out a chair for her. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. "But I'm glad I did." There was an awkward pause as they both adjusted to being face to face after weeks of written words. "I took the liberty of ordering you a coffee," Asher said, gesturing to the steaming mug across from his own. "Black with 1 sugar. I remembered from your letters that's how Jordan took his coffee and how you take yours now." Naomi was touched by the small detail. "Thank you. I hope this isn't strange," Asher said, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. "Meeting like this." "It is strange," Naomi agreed with a small laugh. "But good strange, I think." As they talked, the initial awkwardness faded. Their conversation flowed easily, building on the foundation of their letters. They spoke of everyday things, books they'd read, movies they'd seen, annoying co-workers and traffic jams. What they didn't talk about was their grief. Somehow that belonged to their Sundays, to the cemetery, to their letters. 2 hours passed before either of them checked the time. "I should go," Naomi said reluctantly. "I promised my friend Lisa I'd help her shop for a wedding dress this afternoon." Asher nodded, hiding his disappointment. "Of course." As they stood to leave, he hesitated. Would you like to do this again sometime?" Naomi smiled. "I'd like that very much." Outside the cafe, they paused on the sidewalk. "Thank you for the coffee," Naomi said. "And for the letters. They've meant a lot to me." "To me too," Asher replied softly. For a moment they stood there, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral. He wanted to reach for her hand but stopped himself. It was too soon, too complicated. "I'll see you tomorrow," Naomi asked. "At the cemetery?" Asher nodded. "I'll be there." As Naomi walked away, Asher watched her go, a mix of emotions churning inside him. For the first time in years, he felt something like happiness, but it was tainted by the secret he was keeping. Tomorrow, he promised himself. Tomorrow he would tell her about the cemetery, about his company's plans. He would find a way to fix it before it was too late. What he didn't know was that across town, his chief operating officer was in a meeting with developers, finalizing plans to begin clearing sections of the cemetery as early as next month. The project was moving forward faster than anticipated, and soon there would be no going back. And somewhere between the cafe and her friend's apartment, Naomi's phone pinged with a news alert. She glanced at it absently, then stopped in her tracks as a familiar face looked back at her from the screen. It was Ash, or rather Asher Duvall, tech billionaire and CEO of Duvall Technologies. The headline read, "Duvall expands empire, new development to transform historic site." As she scanned the article, her blood ran cold. The historic site in question was Oakwood Cemetery, where Jordan was buried, where she and Ash had been meeting every Sunday, where he had been keeping secrets from her all along. Naomi barely slept that night. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Asher's face on her phone screen, with that headline blazing beneath it. The betrayal cut deep, deeper than she had expected for someone she barely knew. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She felt like she did know him. Through his letters, through their shared grief, through the coffee shop conversation, that had left her smiling all the way to Lisa's apartment. Now it all felt like a lie. Sunday morning arrived with a clear sky and bitter cold. Naomi sat in her car in the cemetery parking lot, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Part of her wanted to drive away, to never come back, to find a new cemetery for Jordan where billionaires didn't lurk and write beautiful letters while secretly planning to dig up graves. But she couldn't leave Jordan, and she needed answers. She grabbed her things and marched toward Jordan's grave, anger fueling each step. When she reached the familiar spot, she saw him. Asher, not Ash, was sitting on the bench, a letter in his hand, waiting for her. He stood. When he saw her, a tentative smile on his face that quickly faded as he took in her expression. "Naomi, don't!" She cut him off, dropping her tote bag on the ground. "Don't say my name like we're friends." Confusion crossed his face. "What's wrong?" Naomi pulled out her phone, pulled up the article, and thrust it at him. "This is what's wrong, Mr. Duval." Asher's face went pale as he looked at the screen. "Naomi, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me for weeks. That while you were writing me those letters, sharing your feelings, you were planning to destroy this place?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "It's not like that," Asher said, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know about the cemetery acquisition until after we met. It was handled by a subsidiary. I oversee hundreds of projects." "And that makes it better?" Naomi demanded, snatching her phone back. "You've known for weeks, every letter, every Sunday you knew, and you said nothing." Asher looked down at the letter in his hand, the one he'd planned to give her today. "I was going to tell you. Today. That's what this is." He held out the letter, but Naomi didn't take it. "I don't want any more of your letters," she said, her voice low and trembling. "You sat beside me all this time, and you never told me you could take it all away." "I'm not taking anything away," Asher insisted. "Once I found out, I started working to stop it." "Then why haven't you? You're the CEO, you own the company. If you wanted to stop it, it would be stopped," Asher sighed. "It's not that simple. There are contracts, investors, legal obligations. I can't just snap my fingers and make it disappear." "Don't talk to me about simple," Naomi said, tears filling her eyes now. "My husband is buried here, the man I was supposed to grow old with. There is nothing simple about that." She turned away from him, setting up her chair beside Jordan's grave as she always did. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely unfold it. "Naomi, please," Asher said, taking a step toward her. "Let me fix this." She didn't look at him. "Just go." For a moment he stood there watching her. Then, placing the unread letter on the bench, he walked away. Naomi waited until she was sure he was gone before letting the tears fall. She cried for Jordan, for the sanctuary that might be taken from her, and yes, for Asher too, for the connection she'd thought they had. When her tears finally subsided, she looked at the letter on the bench. Despite her anger, curiosity pulled at her. With reluctant fingers, she picked it up and unfolded it. "Naomi," it began, "by the time you read this, I will have told you the truth about who I am and what my company is planning to do with the cemetery. I should have told you weeks ago. There's no excuse for my silence except cowardice and selfishness. I was afraid of losing these Sundays, these letters, this connection that has meant more to me than anything in years." Naomi took a shaky breath and continued reading. "What you don't know is that I've been fighting the development since the day I discovered it. I've been looking for legal loopholes, alternative sites, anything to stop it. So far, I've only managed to delay it, but I promise you this, I will not let them touch this place. Not your husband's grave, not my sister's, not any of them. If I have to buy out every investor, face every lawsuit, I will. Not because it's the right thing to do, though it is, but because I can't bear the thought of taking this away from you." The letter went on, explaining the complications, the legal battles he was facing within his own company. It ended with, "A simple request. I understand if you can't forgive me, but please give me a chance to make this right." Naomi folded the letter and put it in her pocket. She didn't know whether to believe him. She wanted to, desperately. But trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. She poured her coffee and opened her notebook, but the words wouldn't come. After staring at the blank page for nearly an hour, she packed up her things and left. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't write a letter to Jordan. Across town, Asher sat in his penthouse office, phone to his ear. He'd been making calls all day, to lawyers, to board members, to the heads of the subsidiary handling the cemetery project. "I don't care about the profit margins," he was saying, his voice cold and firm. "Find another location." "Mr. Duval," the project manager replied, clearly frustrated. "We've already invested millions in planning. The rezoning application is almost approved. Changing course now would cost—" "I don't care what it costs," Asher interrupted. "The cemetery is off limits. All of it." "Sir, with all due respect, the board won't support this. The shareholders—" "I'll deal with the board and the shareholders," Asher said. "Your job is to find an alternative location. Today." He hung up before the manager could argue further. Leaning back in his chair, Asher rubbed his tired eyes. He'd been up all night, reviewing contracts, searching for a way out of this mess. His assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Duval, the board members are gathering for the emergency meeting you called." Asher nodded. "Thank you, Diana. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." After his assistant left, Asher pulled out the folded piece of paper from his pocket, Naomi's last letter to him, the one she'd left before everything fell apart. He read it again, drawing strength from her words. "Sometimes I think grief is like the tide," she had written. "It comes and goes, but it never really leaves. The trick is learning to swim in it rather than fighting against it." He tucked the letter away and headed to the boardroom. It was time to stop fighting his grief and start fighting for something that mattered. The board meeting was tense. 12 men and women in expensive suits, all looking at Asher like he'd lost his mind. "Let me get this straight," said Robert Winters, the oldest board member. "You want to cancel a $100 million development project because you have a personal attachment to the cemetery." "It's not just about personal attachment," Asher replied calmly. "It's about ethics, about respecting the dead and the people who mourn them." "Since when do ethics trump profits at Duval Technologies?" asked Veronica Hayes, another board member. "You've never cared about these things before, Asher. What's changed?" "Everything," Asher thought, but he kept his answer professional. "What's changed is my understanding of the impact this project would have. The cemetery is not just land. It's a sacred space for thousands of families." "Sacred space doesn't pay dividends," Robert said dismissively. "Neither does a company with a ruined reputation," Asher countered. "Imagine the press when people find out we're digging up graves for a research campus." The room fell silent as the board members considered this. "We're not actually digging up graves," Veronica said finally. "Just repurposing unused sections." This time, Asher agreed. "But the plans clearly show expansion into the currently occupied areas within 5 years." More uncomfortable silence. "Look," Asher continued, "I'm not asking for charity. I'm willing to personally cover the costs of finding and developing an alternative site. All I'm asking is that you support this change in direction." After hours of debate, the board finally agreed to put the cemetery project on hold, not cancelled but paused while alternatives were explored. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. As Asher left the boardroom, Diana handed him a folder. "The information you requested, sir, about the Sinclair property." Asher nodded his thanks and returned to his office. He opened the folder and began to read, a plan forming in his mind. The next Sunday, Naomi hesitated before driving to the cemetery. Part of her wanted to stay away, to break the routine that now felt tainted, but a larger part needed to see Jordan, to sit beside his grave and feel close to him again. When she arrived, she was surprised to see no construction equipment, no signs of development beginning. Everything looked the same as it always had. As she approached Jordan's grave, she noticed something on the bench. Not a letter this time, but a thick manila envelope with her name on it. Cautiously, she opened it. Inside were legal documents, pages and pages of them. On top was a note in Asher's handwriting. "Naomi, I promised I would fix this, and I'm trying. The development has been put on hold while we look for an alternative location, but that's not enough. Enclosed, you'll find the deed to a small parcel of land, specifically the section where Jordan is buried. It now belongs to you. No one can touch it, not even Duval Technologies. It's not much, I know, just a first step. There's more work to be done to protect the entire cemetery, and I won't stop until it's all safe. I understand if you still can't forgive me, but I hope you know. That meeting you has changed everything for me. Asher, Naomi sat on the bench, stunned. She flipped through the documents, confirming what Asher had written. Jordan's grave and the surrounding area now belonged to her. She didn't know how to feel. Grateful, angry that he thought he could buy her forgiveness, relieved that at least this small piece of sacred ground was safe. As she set up her chair and poured her coffee, she noticed another change. Fresh flowers had been placed on Jordan's grave. Not the kind she usually brought, but beautiful white lilies. She touched one gently, wondering if Asher had left them. The thought brought unexpected warmth to her chest, quickly followed by confusion. She was still angry with him, wasn't she? For the first time in weeks, Naomi found the words flowing as she wrote to Jordan. She told him everything about Asher, the letters, the betrayal, the deed now in her possession. I don't know what to do, she wrote. Part of me wants to forgive him. He's trying to make things right. But another part is scared to trust again, to let someone new into this space that's been just ours for so long. As she was writing, she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw Asher standing a respectful distance away. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said quietly. I can come back another time. Naomi closed her notebook. No, it's okay. I was just finishing. Asher nodded toward the envelope on the bench. Did you read it? Yes, Naomi said. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Asher replied. It's not a gift. It's what should have happened from the beginning. Naomi studied his face, the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He looked exhausted. Thank you for the flowers, she said finally. Asher's expression softened. You're welcome. Lilies were Eliza's favorite. I thought... He trailed off, suddenly unsure. They're beautiful, Naomi assured him. An awkward silence stretched between them. Have you been here all night? Naomi asked, noticing that he was wearing the same clothes from the board meeting the day before. Asher gave a tired smile. Is it that obvious? I've been working on a plan to protect the entire cemetery, not just your section. It's complicated, but I think I've found a way. Despite herself, Naomi was curious. What kind of plan? A conservation trust, Asher explained, his eyes lighting up with determination. We could establish a non-profit organization to preserve the cemetery as a historical site. My company would donate the land to the trust, with legally binding protections against future development. It was a good idea, a great one even. But Naomi wasn't ready to let go of her anger completely. Why are you doing all this? She asked. Is it just guilt? Asher shook his head. No, though I do feel guilty for not telling you sooner. He paused, considering his next words carefully. I'm doing it because for the first time in 7 years I care about something. Someone. Your letters, your words. They woke something in me that I thought died with Sarah, and I can't lose that. I can't lose you. The raw honesty in his voice caught Naomi off guard. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected him. I don't know if I can trust you, she said truthfully. I know, Asher replied, and I know I have to earn that trust back. I'm just asking for a chance to try. Naomi looked at Jordan's grave, at the lilies Asher had brought, at the deed that now protected this small piece of sacred ground. Then she looked back at Asher, at the hope and fear mingled in his tired eyes. Okay, she said softly. A chance. Relief washed over Asher's face. Thank you. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, they sat together on the bench, planning how to save the cemetery. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. What? Neither of them knew was that across town, Robert Winters was in a secret meeting with the developers. Asher's gone soft, he was saying, but we don't need his approval to move forward, not if we can convince the other board members to vote him out, the developer smiled. And how do you suggest we do that? Robert slid a folder across the table. By showing them exactly how unstable he's become, I had him followed this past week. You won't believe what I found. Inside the folder were photos, of Asher at the cemetery, of him talking with Naomi, of the letters they'd exchanged, and most damaging of all, documents showing the private transfer of cemetery land to Naomi Sinclair. "He's risking a $100 million project for a woman he barely knows," Robert said. "If that's not grounds for removal, I don't know what is." The trap was set, and Asher, focused only on making things right with Naomi, had no idea it was about to close around him. 2 weeks had passed since Naomi agreed to give Asher a second chance. They had spent nearly every day together, working on the conservation trust for the cemetery. Naomi had taken time off from her job as an elementary school art teacher, pouring her energy into saving the place that meant so much to her. Asher had transformed his home office into a command center for their efforts. Maps of the cemetery covered one wall, legal documents another. Naomi was impressed by his dedication and by how much he had changed from the reserved man she'd first met. "I think we're making progress," Asher said one evening as they sat among stacks of papers. "The Historical Society is on board. They've agreed to help document the cemetery's significance." Naomi nodded, taking a sip from her coffee mug. "And what about your board? Any pushback?" A shadow crossed Asher's face. "Some. Robert Winters is being particularly difficult. But don't worry, I can handle him." What Asher didn't tell her was just how difficult Robert was being. The older man had been rallying board members against him, questioning his judgment, suggesting that personal feelings were clouding his business decisions. Asher had called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He planned to present their conservation plan and put the matter to rest once and for all. He was confident he could win the board over. He had to. "You look tired," Naomi said, studying his face with concern. Asher smiled. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," she insisted. "You've been working non-stop for days." She was right. Between running his company and fighting to save the cemetery, he had barely slept. But seeing Naomi every day, watching her passion and determination, made the exhaustion worthwhile. "Why don't we take a break?" Naomi suggested. "Go for a walk, or something." Asher checked his watch. "It's nearly midnight." "So?" "The park across the street is well lit. We could both use some fresh air." 20 minutes later, they were strolling through the deserted park. The night was cool but not cold, the moon nearly full above them. "Thank you," Asher said after they had walked in comfortable silence for a while. "For what?" "For giving me another chance. For helping with all of this." He gestured vaguely, as if to encompass not just their work on the cemetery, but everything that had changed in his life since meeting her. Naomi smiled. "I should be thanking you. You're the one risking your company to save the cemetery. It's worth it," Asher said simply. They stopped at a small fountain in the center of the park. The sound of water splashing against stone filled the quiet night. "Can I ask you something?" Naomi said, turning to face him. "Anything. Do you think it's possible to love two people? Not at the same time, but one after the other? To love someone new without betraying someone you've lost?" The question caught Asher off guard. His heart hammered in his chest as he considered his answer. "Yes," he said finally. "I do. I think love isn't something with limits. It doesn't run out or get used up." Naomi looked away, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I've been feeling guilty," she admitted. "About you. About how I feel when I'm with you." Asher wanted to reach for her hand, but held back. "You don't have to feel guilty, Naomi. Jordan would want you to be happy. How do you know what he would want?" There was no anger in her voice, just genuine curiosity. "Because I knew Sarah," Asher replied, "and if our situations were reversed, if she had been the one left behind, I would have wanted her to find happiness again, to find someone who understood her grief but didn't let it define her." Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached for his hand. "I think Jordan would have liked you." Asher's fingers intertwined with hers. "I think I would have liked him too." As they walked back to Asher's building, neither let go of the other's hand. The next morning, Asher arrived at Duval Technologies headquarters early. He wanted to review his presentation one last time before the board meeting. But as he stepped off the elevator, he knew something was wrong. Diana, his assistant, was waiting for him with a worried expression. "Mr. Duval, the board is already in session," she said. "Mr. Winters called an early meeting without notifying you." Asher's stomach dropped. "When?" "They've been in there for half an hour." Without another word, Asher strode toward the boardroom, his mind racing. What was Robert up to? As he approached, he could hear raised voices through the door. He pushed it open to find all 12 board members seated around the table, with Robert standing at the head, Asher's usual place. The room fell silent as he entered. "Ah, Asher," Robert said with false pleasantry. "Good of you to join us. We were just discussing your recent activities." Asher took in the scene. A projector was displaying photos on the wall, photos of him and Naomi at the cemetery, at his apartment. "Walking in the park last night." "What is this, Robert?" Asher asked, his voice dangerously calm. "This is an intervention," Robert replied. "The board is concerned about your mental state. Ever since you became obsessed with this woman and her dead husband's grave, you've been making irrational decisions that threaten the future of this company." Asher looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each board member. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious, a few openly hostile. "Is that what this is about?" Asher asked. "Hey, you think I'm unstable because I don't want to destroy a cemetery for profit?" "It's about more than that," Robert said, clicking to the next slide, a document showing the land transfer to Naomi. "You gave away company property worth millions to a woman you barely know. If that's not evidence of poor judgment, I don't know what is." Asher took a deep breath. He had prepared for opposition, but not this kind of ambush. Still, he refused to be intimidated. "I didn't give away company property," he said, moving to the front of the room. "I purchased that parcel with my personal funds and transferred ownership to Ms. Sinclair. It was a private transaction that has no bearing on Duval Technologies." Robert scoffed. "A private transaction motivated by personal feelings that directly interferes with company business." "The cemetery project isn't company business," Asher countered. "It's a subsidiary operation that represents less than 2% of our overall portfolio." He turned to address the entire board. "I came here today to present an alternative plan, one that would preserve the cemetery while still benefiting the company. But it seems Robert would rather attack my character than discuss business solutions." "The board has already voted," Robert said smugly. "We're moving forward with the original development plan, and we're voting next on whether to remove you as CEO." A chill ran through Asher. He had underestimated Robert's influence and his ruthlessness. "On what grounds?" Asher demanded. "Mental and emotional instability affecting business judgment," Robert replied. "The company bylaws are clear. If a 2/3 majority of the board determines the CEO is unfit to serve, they can vote for immediate removal." Asher looked around the room again, trying to gauge where each member stood. He needed allies. "Before you vote," he said calmly, "I'd like to make my case." Robert started to object, but Veronica Hayes cut him off. "Let him speak, Robert. We owe him that much." Robert reluctantly sat down, and Asher took his place at the head of the table. "Yes, I met a woman at the cemetery where my sister is buried," he began. "Yes, I've spent time with her. And yes, I've worked to protect the cemetery from development. But none of that makes me unfit to lead this company." He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and inserted it into the computer, replacing Robert's presentation with his own. "This is the alternative plan I wanted to present today," he continued, displaying a map of a different property. "This land, just 3 miles from the cemetery, is currently for sale. It's larger, has better access to highways, and doesn't require the PR nightmare of building on graves." He clicked to the next slide, showing financial projections. "The acquisition costs are higher initially, but the long-term returns are actually better due to expansion potential." The board members leaned forward, studying the numbers with interest. "As for the cemetery," Asher continued, "I propose we donate it to a non-profit conservation trust, taking a substantial tax write-off in the process. The goodwill and positive press would far outweigh any short-term profits from development." He clicked through more slides, methodically laying out the business case for his plan. When he finished, the room was silent. "This isn't about my personal feelings," Asher said quietly. "It's about making the right business decision for the right reasons. And sometimes, the right business decision is also the right moral decision." Robert stood up, face flushed with anger. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're letting sentimentality cloud your judgment. We're not in the business of morality. We're in the business of technology and real estate." "Actually," said Veronica, "we're in the business of creating value for our shareholders. And Asher's plan does that better than yours, Robert." She turned to Asher. "These projections, they're verified?" Asher nodded. "By 3 independent analysts. The reports are included in the materials I've shared." One by one, the board members began to voice their support for Asher's plan. Robert watched in disbelief as his coup crumbled before his eyes. "This isn't over," he said finally, gathering his things. "You're making a mistake. All of you." As he stormed toward the door, Asher called after him. "Robert, wait." The older man paused, glaring back. "Clean out your office," Asher said calmly. "Your services on this board are no longer required." Robert's face turned purple with rage, but before he could respond, 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Winters will escort you out," one of them said. After Robert was gone, the board voted unanimously to adopt Asher's alternative plan. As the meeting adjourned, Veronica approached him. "That was well played," she said with grudging admiration. "But Robert wasn't entirely wrong, you know. You have changed these past few weeks." Asher smiled. "Yes, I have. For the better, I think." "She must be quite a woman," Veronica remarked. "She is," Asher agreed, checking his watch. "And I need to go tell her the good news." He found Naomi where they had arranged to meet, at the Blue Cup Cafe, the same place they'd had coffee together that first time. She was sitting at the same corner table, nervously shredding a napkin. When she saw him, she stood up. "How did it go?" Asher couldn't contain his smile. "We won. The cemetery is safe." Naomi's hand flew to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "Really? All of it?" "All of it," Asher confirmed. "We're donating the land to a conservation trust. It will be protected forever." With a cry of joy, Naomi threw her arms around him. Asher held her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her tears dampen his shirt. When she pulled back, her face was radiant despite the tears. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know how to thank you enough." "You don't have to thank me," Asher replied. "You're the one who made me care again, who showed me there were things more important than profit margins and stock prices." Naomi touched his face gently. "What happens now?" "Now?" Asher considered the question. "Now we set up the trust, make sure the paperwork is ironclad. And then—" "And then?" Naomi prompted. Asher took her hand. "And then whatever you want, Naomi. I don't want to rush you. I know you're still healing, still figuring out what comes next." Naomi looked down at their joined hands. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said last night, about loving someone new without betraying someone you've lost." She met his eyes again. "I think I'm ready to try." Asher felt a surge of hope, so strong it nearly took his breath away. "Are you sure?" "No," Naomi admitted with a small laugh. "I'm terrified, but I want to find out. With you." 3 months later, on a crisp Sunday morning, Naomi sat in her usual spot beside Jordan's grave. The cemetery looked different now. Signs announcing its status as a protected historical site stood at the entrances, and a team of conservationists had begun restoring some of the oldest sections. But Naomi's routine remained the same. Chair, coffee, notebook. The only difference was that now sometimes Asher joined her. Today, though, she had asked to be alone. She needed to say some things to Jordan that were just for him. "I met someone," she said softly, tracing Jordan's name on the headstone. "His name is Asher. He's nothing like you, but in some ways he reminds me of you. He's kind, stubborn, he makes me laugh." She took a deep breath. "I think I'm falling in love with him, and I wanted you to know. I wanted to tell you before anyone else." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but they weren't entirely sad ones. "I'll always love you, Jordan, always. That won't change. But my heart is starting to make room for someone else too. I hope that's okay." A gentle breeze rustled the flowers on the grave, the lilies that Asher now brought every week alongside Naomi's traditional roses. "I think you would like him," she continued. He saved this place, you know, made sure I could keep visiting you, made sure no one would disturb your rest. She wiped her tears away. I'm going to keep coming here, keep bringing you coffee, keep writing you letters sometimes. That won't change either. But the letters might be different now. Happier, maybe. As Naomi sat in peaceful silence, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Not the grief itself, but the guilt she had carried about moving forward. After a while, she packed up her things and walked back to the parking lot, where Asher was waiting, leaning against his car. "Okay?" he asked simply. Naomi nodded. "Okay." They drove to a small cafe for breakfast, talking easily about everyday things. As they were finishing their meal, Asher reached into his coat pocket. "I have something for you," he said, placing a small envelope on the table. Naomi looked at it curiously. "What is it?" "Open it and see." Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter written in Asher's neat handwriting. "To the woman who taught me how to write to someone I lost," it began. "I finally did it. I wrote to Sarah last night. Told her about you, about how unexpected and beautiful it is to feel this way again. Thank you for showing me how to keep the past with me, while still reaching for the future." Naomi looked up, tears in her eyes. "Asher." He took her hand across the table. "There's more." She continued reading. "I know it's too soon to talk about forever. We're both still finding our way. But I want you to know that I'm in this, all the way, however long it takes. Because loving you doesn't feel like starting over. It feels like continuing a story I thought had ended. A different chapter, but the same theme. Love survives. Even loss, even grief, even us." The letter was signed simply, "Yours, Asher." Naomi folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. "I have something for you too," she said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to him. It wasn't from her usual notebook. This paper was cream-colored stationery she had bought specially. Asher unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words Naomi had written. "To the man who reads my letters now," it began. "I've spent 3 years writing to someone who can't write back, pouring my heart onto pages that no one was meant to see. Until you. You read my words when the wind carried them to you. And somehow, you knew exactly what I needed. Someone who understood that grief isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to carry." Asher looked up at her, his eyes bright with emotion, then continued reading. "I don't know what happens next for us, but I know I want to find out. So here's a new letter, the first of many, I hope. Not to someone I've lost, but to someone I've found. Someone I'm choosing. Someone who might choose me back." The letter ended with a simple question. "Ready to write a new story together?" Asher looked up, his answer clear in his eyes before he even spoke. "Yes," he said. "I'm ready." The following Sunday dawned grey and rainy. Naomi drove to the cemetery alone. As she always did, some traditions needed to be preserved, even as new ones began. She set up her chair under her umbrella, poured coffee from her thermos, and placed a cup on Jordan's headstone. "Black with 1 sugar," she said softly, just as she had for 3 years. She opened her notebook and began to write, not a letter of grief or anger or loneliness this time, but one of gratitude, for the love she'd had with Jordan, for the years they'd shared, for the ways he had shaped her into the woman she was now, the woman who could love again. When she finished, she closed the notebook and looked up at the sound of approaching footsteps. Asher stood a short distance away, respectfully waiting, rain beading on his black umbrella. Naomi gathered her things and walked to him. She held out a single folded piece of paper, the letter she had just written. "You've read all my letters," she said, echoing the words from the first note she had left for him. "Maybe now it's time I write one to someone new." Asher took the letter with one hand and reached for her with the other. Together, they walked through the rain, leaving behind the past but carrying with them the love that had shaped them both, the love that had brought them together in a place of endings, that had somehow become a place of beginnings. Above them, the clouds began to part, letting through a single ray of sunlight. It fell across the cemetery, illuminating the path ahead of them, uncertain, yes, but no longer walked alone. The end.